Welcome back to the channel. Jacob here, Miami Dolphins Syndicate. Last season was an issue in there were so many issues with the Dolphins last season, whether it be star players on the team didn't perform well or were injured, a draft class that came in that didn't have an impact immediately. Chop Robinson came on towards halfway point of the season. Malik Washington had an impact at the end of the year. However, the draft rookie class as a whole didn't have a big impact on the season. And then the biggest letdown for the Dolphins was the players that were brought in from free agency. Last year saw so many guys that were in their 30s. I'm talking about Calais Campbell, I'm talking about Jordan Poyer, I'm talking about Kendall Fuller, guys that were clearly likely on the last stops in their NFL careers. That's what the Dolphins decided to bring in as replacements for Andrew Van Ginkel, for Christian Wilkins, for the other guys that we saw walk in free agency. And then this year, obviously you can't do that again. Obviously, the Dolphins had to assess the situation that they did wrong last year. Chris Grier, Mike McDaniel, likely on their last chances as being in charge of the Miami Dolphins. And so far, I don't want to be off-season warriors. I don't want to be off-season wonders. But so far, I like what the Miami Dolphins have done to address some of their issues in free agency so far. Now, some of you might be looking at this and looking at this video like, well, what exactly have the Dolphins done in free agency? The Dolphins haven't made really any big moves. We haven't made our Tyreek Hill acquisition. We haven't brought in any stars. We haven't spent big money on anybody. And quite frankly, I'm pretty happy that's the way the Dolphins have decided to go about this free agency class. As mentioned, Mike McDaniel, Chris Grier, likely on their last chances to be in charge of the Miami Dolphins. Now, this season needs to be a success for them, one way or another. My definition of success, your definition of success, the Dolphins' definition of success are all probably slightly different variations of the same thing. Want to make the playoffs, want to win a playoff game, want to play a more appealing brand of football than we saw last year. We want overall things to be just a 180 of what we saw at times last season. In many ways, the talent was there. Tua just came off his best season of his career, was the number one passer in the league the previous season. Tyreek Hill was in the MVP race till late in the season, just lost out on Offensive Player in the Year, ranked number one amongst his NFL peers, players in the league in the players poll. Jalen Waddle, hoping that he blossoms into another year on this Dolphins team behind Tyreek Hill. Jonnu Smith was the lone good addition to this team, it really felt like. On the other side of the ball, Jalen Ramsey, you know what you're getting from him, was one of the best cornerbacks in all of football coming to the season. You know, you thought you had your edge position secure when they got healthy with Bradley Chubb, with Jalen Phillips, Javon Holland. You hope it was going to be a rock at the safety position. And then pretty much every single player I just mentioned outside of Jonnu Smith disappointed one way or another. And then you strike that with being not complemented by pieces brought in from free agency or through the draft. The pieces are there. The talent is there. The top-end products that you would be potentially going out and getting at this point in the season, the Dolphins already have. The Dolphins have retained most of the guys I just mentioned. Tua, Tyreek, and Waddle on the offensive side of the ball. Devon Achane, didn't mention him. They're all still there. On the defensive side of the ball, Bradley Chubb's going to come back healthy. Jalen Phillips is going to come back healthy. Jalen Ramsey is going to come back and hopefully be somewhat close to the rendition of himself that we saw as a Hall of Fame corner. Obviously, Javon Holland has walked, but otherwise, so many of the star pieces that are were in place with this Dolphins team that disappointed last year, but were great at other points in their career up to last year, they are still there. They're still a part of the Dolphins team. So it is the same story as it was last offseason. Now, the Dolphins had to go out and address some holes on the team, had to address depth on the team, had to address special teams, and bring in players that aren't going to be your highlighted feature players. They're going to be guys that are the next in line. They're going to be guys that fill out the rest of the roster, because there are other positions that aren't going to have stars this year. There are going to be weak positions on this team that you just got to go out and try to fill out with the best talent. And whether it is the best talent or not, I think the Dolphins have done such a better job at evaluating talent and evaluating where players are in their careers, bringing them into the team this free agency period. I'm looking at Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, who is coming over from a very bad Tennessee Titans offense, however, was a fighter and somebody that demanded the ball, found the ball in all areas of the field, was a hard worker, which is something that at times this Dolphins team has been accused of not being. Hardworking, tenacious, that fighting spirit. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, you saw that from him, and what we saw from him was 6 games in a row, their amounts of touchdowns in a row. Again, on a bad Titans team where he was never the first option, He was rarely the second option before DeAndre Hopkins left. Most often the time, he was the third option and still found ways to be impactful. 27 years old, coming into the prime of his career, those are the types of players. Players that are fighting hard, players that are in the right age range. Those are the kind of guys we need to see the Miami Dolphins bring in. Zach Wilson, backup quarterback, adds a little bit of athleticism, which Mike McDaniel wants. Spending some money at the backup quarterback position when you know that Tua, unfortunately, eventually is going to go down to injury. You take that position serious. You don't just ship off 4 games, consider them losses like we did last year. You go take that position seriously, and you go get somebody that has talent, that is obviously he's in this position for a reason. He is not a starting quarterback level player in this league. However, if he comes in a backup role, he's still in the age range that if he has a really good season, he could go on and then get a starting role somewhere else. He could have a Sam Darnold season. He could have a Justin Fields season, where these are younger players that have not worked out for one reason or another at multiple places, and then they finally find their right spot and hit it off. Zach Wilson, if he has to play 4 weeks because Tua goes down and goes on IR again, I have confidence that Mike McDaniel is going to coach him up to get the best out of him. The Dolphins have addressed positions of need. The very first 2 signings outside of Zach Wilson that you make are offensive linemen, both on the interior. The interior for the Dolphins last year on the offensive line was abysmal. And what you do is you go out and sign 2 new guys. You bring back Liam Eichenberg. All of these guys below the age of 30. You then go on and get the Nick Westbrook and Keenan. You then go and bring in 2 younger safeties that on their own are not as good as Javon Holland, but with the right coaching and with the right talent around them performing at their peak, as well as the fact that they're still in their athletic primes, you feel confident that on their days, they can provide you their best football they've got. Whereas we look at the guys we brought in last year, we knew their best football was behind him. You were just hoping to squeeze the orange just a little bit more and see what the Dolphins could get out of them. And ultimately, it led to a lackluster secondary, which was full of older guys, and a lackluster team in general, which saw so many guys brought in on the last runs of their career. And we watched the guys that are supposed to take those positions and run with it as they were entering the prime of their careers, go off and have those seasons with other teams. Just about, or maybe even every single guy that the Miami Dolphins have brought in this year with free agency is below the age of 30. They are in that age range of 27 years old to 29 years old, where you're going to get 2 or 3 peak seasons from them. Whatever you get from them at this point in their career is likely the best they will ever be for the rest of their career. I actually admire Chris Grier for going for that angle, for not going for the star approach, for not overspending on a Joey Bosa, who was out there on the market to be had, some more expensive players that really would have limited the depth and filling out this team had he gone out and spent $10 million on an older player who I don't know if he's going to make it to week 4. And stand upright and be healthy on the field. I don't know if Joey Bosa still has the ability to do that. But Chris Grier very well could have tried to put all his eggs in the star basket like he has before. Instead, he's filled out the team with responsible signings at positions of need. I got to tip the cap. I got to respect what he's done here, the angle he's approached this team at, because it could have been so easy for him to just throw money at big players and hope it works like he's done before. Instead, a more reserved, team-friendly approach. And now the Dolphins still have their draft picks to use up here in the draft, a top 15 pick upcoming, which should see a player that is able to come in and have an impact immediately. Hopefully, we see that pick somewhere on the interior, whether that's the defensive line, because the defensive line is the one position that maybe you look at the free agency list, could have been addressed a little bit better. Who's going to be alongside Zach Sealer? Not a lot of talent there, so I could see the Dolphins bringing in a defensive lineman, a defensive tackle with one of their first 3 picks, an offensive lineman, somebody to replace Teron Armstead long term, somebody on the interior. Definitely positions of need for this Dolphins team, but just what we've seen so far, I got to give a thumbs up to Chris Grier. I'm not going to say it's an A+ free agency class because it's absolutely not. I don't want to be off-season wonders again. But fair play. I think he's done well. I think we've brought in players that aren't necessarily going to be massive game changers, but you have 53 spots. You need to have guys that aren't necessarily going to be game changers. You need to have guys that are just out there to make a play or two and keep the players around them, to keep the stars around them, let them be able to shine while you do some of the dirty work. I like it. I think it's going to work. I hope it's going to work, because if not, somebody else is going to be making these decisions this time next year. Let me know your thoughts on the signings. Do you think he's done well? Do you think Mike McDaniel's done well? Do you think they could have been a little bit more aggressive and attacked some star players and brought some guys in, some bigger name guys, and spent money at those positions? I don't know where you would suggest the money could come from, because throughout this entire free agency period, we have been towards the bottom in the NFL in terms of money available to spend. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. We'll catch y'all next time. Have a great rest of your day. Go Dolphins.